What's up, guys? Max here, back with a brand new episode of the Scuttlebutt Show. And as you can see, I am joined today by a very special guest, author of, an officer, and a man that I've got right here, Marine, author, all-around good guy, Jacob Donnenwirth. How are you doing today?
Ahoy. What's going on, Max?
Ahoy. I love that greeting. Epic greeting. So it's great to see you. Thank you for joining me. You've been on the show before to talk.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing to talk to you again, to be here on YouTube with you. Your book, which has, and I always tell people this, tears rolling down my face from laughter because it's so funny, your experience in the Marine Corps. We talked all about it last time, and I can't stress enough how strongly I feel that everyone should go out and buy a copy of it. But you've got something brand new going on in your life that is maybe even bigger than this. Can you just kind of introduce yourself for anybody who might not know you and what is going on in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Jake Donnenwirth. I did the military thing for about 6 years. I was a combat engineer officer. Wrote that book that Max was talking about afterwards. I tried to fit all of the PG-13, but mostly family-friendly, like fun stories in there. I found this niche in military humor that is not X-rated, because I've read a couple of other military humor books, and I was reading those. My wife was like, "Hey, what you reading?" I'm like, "Nothing. You wouldn't like it." But I tried to write mine in the confines of, like, could I give a copy to my mother and not be embarrassed? So I wrote that book. I found it funny, but that's all it made my cut of being able to add it to the book. But they're also my stories, and I think I'm funny, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like I say on the back cover is, whether you think I was a good officer or a bad officer, as long as you think it was funny, I accept it. That's my goal here. So I wrote that book, a couple of years ago now, right? Because that was in 20 that wow. I think that came out. I think it was
2020. Yep.
Yeah. Right after the plague kicked off.
Yep.
So yeah, did that. And then been doing the stay-at-home mom thing, which has been awesome. Doing some Navy contracting, teaching the ESAMI courses for NECC, like EOD and Riverines and CBs, and those guys that go ashore but aren't SF, for the Navy instructor trainer package for them. So Train to Train, I love the brand there.
Thank you.
That's good merch. So I've been doing that, and then this year I got this harebrained idea. I was talking to a guy at my church, and he was like, "You know what I was thinking? Anyone can run for sheriff, right? Maybe I'll just run for sheriff. Old guy's retiring." And I was like, "Oh, Mike, you're funny." And that kind of, it was one of those Dane Cook like thought bombs, that seed that plants and then later on it bursts out in inconvenient time. So I don't know if anyone in the chat gets that Dane Cook reference where it's like randomly like, "My father was a great man." I was driving down the road several months later, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the leadership experience that I have coming out of the Marine Corps. I haven't been a company commander, I haven't been an XO in charge of like all the training and all the maintenance and everything in a almost 300 person company when I was over in Okinawa. My experience as a company commander over at SOI. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's one of those things that's not really tangible. You can't train to do that. You either sink or swim, and I've done that. Sheriff's Department here is almost 300 people. Like, that's well within my wheelhouse. My degree was in criminal justice. I've never carried a badge, but I love cops. I respect the crap out of them. They're the good guys, and also they're human, and it needs to be met with a certain amount of humility and understanding and accountability, and all that should be wrapped up in a cops are the good guys sandwich. And I thinking about that, which obviously it's my opinion, so I think it's right. But thinking about that and what I want to bring to a department and the leadership experience that I have, and just kind of my general opinion that being in charge means it's your fault, unless something good happens, in which case it was the guys that were doing the work. It was them. It was all them. If it was good, it was all me. If it was bad, And I think that that's something that that doesn't necessarily come from experience doing a job. It comes from experience leading people, and that, you know, that was a valid contribution to that position that was available, because, you know, like I said, the guy who's currently sheriff is retiring. So that was my initial thoughts into it, right? And then let me know if I go on for too long, if you want to cut in and be like, wait, I have a question about something. You just said that and that makes no sense.
Tell your story.
So yeah, I got into it thinking like, well, not only that, right? Not only do I have this this leadership experience in running huge organizations and not sucking at it, and the people that worked for me enjoying working for me and telling me that I was a good boss. So I have that in the back of my mind, but I'm looking at, you know, there's a danger to institutionalization that comes with being part of a bureaucracy for 20, 30, 40 years that I think we see a lot of the times with flag officers, right? Where it's like you see something that they do and it's like, well, was that because it was right? Or was that because it was good for the Navy? Was that because it was right? Or did the Marine Corps unit really need that to happen? So the longer you're in an institution, the more value you start to give the existence of that institution. And if that weighs against your moral principles, which way are you going to lean? You know, I think that there is value to come in like an independent auditor or consultant and just look at, hey, what's going on here? Does this make sense? Is this correct? You know, does this help the community? Or is this neutral or bad for the community, but it finds money for the department? And I think coming at it without, you know, with the loyalty of, yeah, cops are the good guys, but not the loyalty of, well, we need that $5,000, especially if it's going to negatively impact the community. And I can get into an example of that in a little bit if you want to, of kind of what sort of policies I'm talking about. But yeah, so that's kind of what got me into it. Is I think I have the relevant experience to make this happen. And there's a positive in my eyes of not being institutionalized in this particular bureaucracy. But then on top of that, I started conversing with some people who were like, well, you haven't even climbed the local ropes of the GOP and you don't even know who's who in the zoo. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're saying that this self-government idea that the founding fathers had, it's no good. You're a fan of oligarchy. I found a problem. Now I have more questions, you know? So it's been good. I think a lot of the people that I've conversed with are just, you know, regular, everyday, average Americans, and they like the idea. And there's been a few people that I've talked to that are like real heavy in the department loyalty or the personal loyalties or the GOP loyalties. They're like, well, we don't know you, so you must be Satan. I'm gonna say no. So it's been interesting. It's been a lot of fun so far. But I'm meeting a lot of good people, so we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I think it's refreshing to hear, you know, you say something that I've critiqued before, which is that it frightens me when I hear people vying for power because of how much they hate something rather than how much they love something. And you see that a lot nowadays, and I mean it when I say it's frightening, because it is it's saying that the will of the people agrees, you know? It's saying that the vote agrees that we should vote, that we should elect based on what we collectively hate rather than what we collectively love and want to see improve and prosper. And I think that that's a much more appropriate and effective direction to go. So I like that you say that a lot. I also agree that it doesn't take someone to be the person who has been doing the job every day to be the right person to lead the people who are doing the job. Not that there's not things that you could learn and know and valuable experience to be gained.
Oh yeah,
but it
absolutely.
doesn't it's not exclusionary just because you haven't done that too. And I think we see that a lot in the military. How many times have you been put in charge of a group of people or a department or something like that, and you're like, this isn't my thing, but hey, I can do it because I can lead people.
Yeah, the old bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think that outside of the military, people take for granted, because I've tried to explain this to a couple of people and they're like, but you don't have any experience. And I'm like, right, but I'm not trying to do that job. I'm trying to do this job. And they're like, you don't have any experience. It's like, okay, I think it's difficult to put into words, I guess, how much of a crapshoot the leadership of the United States military is at any given organization, right? Because you show up, let's say, let's just take my career path, which is like somewhat typical for a combat engineer, right? I showed up and they're like, yeah, all the platoons are full. You get the construction shop. Okay, what does that mean? Well, there's a big inspection in 6 months, and if you fail, then the boss might get fired. It's called a phasmo. Currently, we're scoring like a 20%. Anything other 90, you're in trouble. It's like, okay, well, I don't know anything about maintenance because my MOS school was like, fuel spreadsheets and bill of materials bombs and explosives bombs, right? So I guess I better read a book and figure this thing out because you're holding my career hostage unless I do a good job at this, right? So I did that. And then next was the platoon. And they were like, okay, now you have a platoon, go. And I was like, awesome. Now I get to do all the things that I studied. And they're like, no, like we have 5-paragraph orders that need to get sent up. And we have PowerPoint presentations that need to get briefed. And we have all the range safety stuff that, you need to be certified in. Then you need to make sure everything's good. You're not actually going to do anything. You have to make sure all the stuff is done so we can do stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know how any of that works. So I guess I better figure it out. Because again, you're holding my career hostage unless I do a good job at this. And then same thing when you get to an XO. It's like, what's the XO do? Well, have you been one? Yeah. Then Have you been one? No. I guess you'll figure it out when you are one. Like, that's it. There's like, it's everything. It's the armory, it's maintenance, it's personnel, it's training. It's making sure the new lieutenant doesn't look like an idiot when he does his confirmation brief to the CO. It's like all this stuff that your job is figure it the F out, right? And it's like, that's almost everybody that I know who is in the Marine Corps as an officer. That's what their jobs are, right? So in the civilian world, I think that is, that's crazy to think that way, right? Like you get your business degree, you show up, it's got nothing to do with business. And they're like, I don't know, man, you're gonna have to figure it out. We're gonna fire your ass. No retirement for you. Like people would freak out about that. Be like, I don't know why I got this degree. That's like every time you PCS as an officer in the military. So, it's like I look at stepping into a job where everybody there knows more about doing their job than I do, but I'm going to be the guy held responsible. And it's like, hey, I've done that before. I've never been the guy who knows the most in the room ever, unless it was just other lieutenants.
That's it. It's trained to train. Like I always say, right? You're defining it. It's trained. It's that skill of, that the military gives you that you don't get a lot of other places, which is prepare to be given challenges that you've never had before, jobs you've never had before, and knowing exactly what to do right away, which is to get to work and start. One of the best skills that I learned in the Navy, and I tell, young people this, that I guess I can say young people now being like upper 30s. I meet someone,
we're getting old.
Yeah. When I meet somebody who's young in the military, I tell them one of the most powerful things you can do as a young, sailor, soldier, airman, or Marine is learn how to navigate doctrine. Like, I think probably most enlisted people don't look at doctrine that governs what they do until they're like an NCO. They don't even know what it is. They don't even know it exists. And you're like, well, how does my NCO even know what to do today? And it's like, they read the manual, which you have access to also, and just walking in with like that kind of knowledge or that kind of approach could make you successful at anything, and I think that sheriff is probably right in line with that type of governmental, not like police, not to compare police and military, but the structure is very similar. Chain of command, rank structure, dealing with use of force, and everything's governed by doctrine. Right. And now you know how to do that.
Right. With this one, like, that I'm just so excited about difference, right? Which is your fit rep is every 4 years and it's an election.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like I said, I advertise who I am as a man, and then you vote for me. And then I just execute Jake Donnenwirth moving forward for 4 years, right? And then I'm like, all right, guys, fire me or keep me, and that's it. That's it. That whole middle time, You're just, hey, here's bad, here's good, here's wrong, here's right. Well, I'm going to do good, I'm going to do right. There you go. That's it. There's no, you're going to get fired, or you're not going to get career designated, or you're not going to get the PCS or the duty station of your choice because you made so-and-so mad. It's like, hey, I work for the people. People voted for me based on what I said. That's what I'm going to do. That's it.
I don't know if anybody out there is like me, but I feel like we should address one thing before we proceed any further, just in case someone out there is like me. When I hear sheriff being, no experience in law enforcement, I'm like, cowboys, Wild West. What is the role of a county sheriff? Like, what's really your job? What's the elevator pitch of what your responsibilities are?
So all a county sheriff is technically, like by law, supposed to do is run the jail, do court security, and serve papers. Everything else is, well, I guess since we have money and people showed up to work, we can do it, right? So like DUI task force and running the road on calls to service and all that stuff, which I think is all very important. But those are all the deputies that do all that stuff, or the folks that work down at the jail, the corrections officers. Those guys run that stuff. The sheriff is making sure the budget's all set, coordinating with outside agencies to try to get funding for different programs, coordinating with other agencies on to link them up with the people who are doing investigations, and making sure that policy is in line with what the people who live there expect out of law enforcement, right? Because the county sheriff in San Francisco probably has a different set of expectations from the people that live there versus here, or versus Florida or New York City, right? So that I think is a huge part of being the sheriff. It's often overlooked because people are worried about, like, what are law enforcement people doing, and how is the sheriff directly interacting and driving policy on, how is Officer Timmy writing speeding tickets, and for what speeds, and whatever. But I think what the sheriff should be doing more of is kind of keeping his thumb on the pulse of what's going on in the state capitol, what's going on in the national capitol, and laws that are going to come down. And if necessary, basically like standing at the border of the county and being like, yeah, I'm not going to do that here because the people who voted for me share this set of morals, and it doesn't involve, turning in guns, for example. Like, that's an easy one, right? That people keep asking about ever since the last year's election, right? It's like, oh no, this common sense gun reform stuff, is that going to come here? And I think it's the county sheriff's job, especially in a county like this one, to go, no, it's not happening here. Okay, send the state troopers. I bet I can deputize more people than you can overnight. It's like that's kind of the sheriff's job, in my opinion, is to protect the rights of the people that vote for him, from everyone. It's like, so Second Amendment, right to self-defense against who? Yes, that bad guy, this other bad guy, a bad government, another country. Yes. Okay. Sheriff supposed to protect the people's rights from who? Yes, that bad guy, that other bad guy, these misguided government employees who've been sent here to do the wrong thing. I will also protect you from them. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough. And there are some county sheriffs that you hear about on the news that are like, this is a Second Amendment sanctuary, or, that's something that we won't be doing here, I promise you, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a huge part of being the sheriff, because it is a political position. It's not just a law enforcement position. I think that leadership aspect is typically derived from law enforcement experience, in most cases, but a big part of it that doesn't get discussed that should is that political aspect of it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's listening in the chat right now and who's commenting and asking questions. I'll try to get to these questions. There was actually a good one in here that I want to get to. And it was from Buford in the chat. And I just want to find it really quick. Effectively, it was, at what point, here it is. It's at what rank do you become a politician instead of somebody who does their job honorably? And That's a really great question, because we look
Like in the military.
well, I think you can answer
Just in general.
you can answer in the military, but like if you're running for sheriff, and you've kind of already addressed it a little bit, but do you think that once you're in that system, it's like anyone's character can survive political pressure? Like, have you experienced anything of like people trying to bash you publicly, people trying to influence you, people trying to incentivize you, anything like that? Has any of that already happened?
Not yet. I'm sure it will at some point, right? But that's why I think I talked about it here, and not just when we were talking before the show. But that's why who you are needs to be on full blast during the campaign, right? Because then, in a representative government, I'm representing you, this guy who voted for me. Here are my principles, and this is the way that I'm going to address every problem. So you don't have to wonder, like, how's Jake going to react to this scenario? You pick me because we think the same on a lot of things. So you have a good prediction about how I'm going to act in this scenario. So where I think that people start to lose their character and their moral foundation is when, out of what I think is probably a misguided sense of fairness, once they've been elected to get into the office by the majority of people that voted, they start listening to the minority of people who oppose the people that voted for them, out of this, like, well, I represent everybody thought process. And while that's true, the majority of people that elected you didn't represent you to now represent the other people. So you're losing all your credibility, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the people that voted for you can't trust you, because you might listen to the people that think the other way on any given topic, right? And the people who swayed you now can factually say, well, if we just, convince, threaten, throw money at whatever the problem hard enough, he'll probably change his mind. He's done it before. And I think some of that comes from that misguided sense of fairness. Like, well, now I represent everybody, so I have to set what I think is right aside on this decision to represent the people. And I think that some of it could be, and this is what I think, where you start becoming politicians in the military, is when someone wants the job more than they want the job to matter. Because once you hit that point where you're like, you know what, I disagree with this, but if I really want to keep having a job and get that retirement, I guess I need to buckle here. Or, well, I really disagree with this, but I don't think I'm going to get elected if I play it this way. Now you're saying that having the job is more important than the job, because the job is to represent majority of the people in the way that they think and make decisions the way that they would make that decision. So that way decisions get made to their benefit. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a society, right? Is like-minded people who create an organization so they get what they want more of the time. Society, right? So, democratically, like in the voting process, not in a party line, democratically, if most of the people vote for me, and then I do exactly what I said I was going to do, and I make 49% of the people mad for 4 years, I mean, not for nothing, but there weren't enough of you. And it's, that goes against the democracy to then say, well, I guess you make a good point. I could abandon my morals here and go this way. It's like, no, your job is just to charge forward. And I think that's where people start to become, the politician that nobody trusts, is when they're like, well, I guess out of fairness.
Yeah. I think that would,
there's no short answers tonight, apparently.
No, I think it's a very thoughtful answer, and that's the best I could hope to get out of anybody. I think it is very complicated, and I've never had to navigate that sphere before. I don't know how I would do, especially when you are elected to public office and you have people that you're accountable to, right? The people that voted for you, but also you do,
right.
You do affect the lives of everybody that you serve for. And then I try to be considerate of what people might be, having this internal conflict on their head, where you'll be faced with likely tons of challenges that, have you questioning your own ethics and morals and character. And I guess part of it is where do you flex? Where do you play ball? And for me, the thing I always come back to is, well, if you come up with something that's a challenging issue for you, you don't know which way to go on it. And then so you go, well, I can't do this. This is forcing me out of the position because, I'm not going to bend here. And if that means that I get fired or I have to resign or whatever, then so be it. But then that's also the last time you'll ever help anybody too. That'll be the last time that you have a chance to make the positive difference you want to make in somebody's life. And so I guess all of these issues come down to one at a time, right? One issue at a time, one decision at a time.
How to eat an elephant.
Yeah. One bite at a time, right?
Exactly. And a lot of that too is like, there are, like I said, I think if there's like, 280 people between the detention center and the sheriff's office that work in that building. Okay. We're talking like thousands of years of experience in the building. Right. So if I'm doing everything that we all agree is the right thing to do in being a leader, which is listening to the experts that have been there longer than you and tempering their opinion based on their expertise with, hopefully it's in line with, but in cases where it isn't, your moral framework, right? Then that's how you arrive at a decision that makes sense. So it's not doing this in a vacuum where I'm just like, oh, I don't know anything about that, but it seems wrong, so I can't do it. It's like, that's what leadership is. The same as when you step in and take over a company and you don't know anyone and you've never done this before. You got to lean on your first sergeant. You got to lean on the company guns. You got to lean on those platoon sergeants, right? It's exactly the same in my eyes coming into this, where it's like, well, obviously I'm going to have to lean on the experts. There's like thousands of years of experience in that building. It's pretty presumptuous to think like, well, once I'm elected, all of a sudden I'll know what the right thing is. It's like, no, get out of here, guy. Like,
do you, on the subject of, change the topic here a little bit, because something came up in the comments that just inspired a question here. It was Jacob, make sure you guys are well trained on the knife hand. What Sam said, it sounds like you're trying to keep true to your leadership principles, all 14 of them. And so
don't ask me to recite them. Yeah. There's cheat sheets for a reason.
So, with those leadership principles and with that knife hand in mind, when you do become sheriff, if you're elected and become sheriff, right, what are your priorities? Is it, training? Is it human resources? Is it recruiting? What are your priorities? What are your strengths in this regard?
So, I'm very, very fortunate to look at Onslow County sheriffs right now. Like, they're doing a good job. It's a solid department, right? So, and especially without being behind the scenes in any like authoritative position beforehand, I don't have any, well, this is something that has to change as soon as I take over. Because even that I find to be pretty presumptuous, like, without coming in and taking a look around and saying like, okay, here's some stuff that you do. I want to understand why, right? And this is not to take any shots at anyone, right? But like the funny little anecdote goes that two people are walking through a field, a conservative and a progressive, and they come across a fence, and the conservative is like, I don't know why this is here. Maybe we should ask some questions before we tear it down. And the progressive is like, this is in my way, right? So I think it's important not to be the guy who comes in and is like, well, I'm in charge now, so this is how we're doing stuff. Like, take a look around, figure out why things are done the way they are, and then start asking questions about what can be better and what the second, third order backwards planning effects are that have led us to where we are. And if it's because we've always done it, or because we just got sick of rewriting the SOP, so we stopped eventually, then that's not good enough, right? If it's, well, we used to do it the way that you're talking about, but this is what occurred, okay, I accept that. We can move on. But one of the things that I would really like to take a deep dive into is the training, right? And that's for two huge reasons. First off, I know this may blow your mind.
I'm ready.
There are some law enforcement entities who teach hand-to-hand and shooting techniques that are hot garbage. Trash. Absolute trash. Like, put it out tomorrow morning because it's Thursday. So like that's the first thing that, like, it blows my mind. And so we talked very briefly about behaviorally based combatives, like just kind of the stuff that I do. It's based on what the human body does under stress. And it much favors the side of gross motor versus fine motor because of what people are capable of under stress, right? Same reason everything is accessible, like with the palm of your hand, or it tries to be with the M16, because, you know, if you had to like reach inside and do the bullet button, like you're in California, Tawny Taliban's going to win that day, right? So no, I guess we're not fighting them anymore, right? We were like high five at the airport.
Yeah, we're buddies
now. We'll have to go with his girlfriend, Ali Qaeda. So, you know, it's the same thing when you come to hand-to-hand stuff, right? So I went to FLETC when I was in college, a federal law enforcement training center, because this guy who actually, if I have my story correctly, he came out of retirement to go back to the Marshals to teach this system to the Marshals, because when he was retired, he found what we do and was like, this is better than what I was getting when I was a Marshal. I need to fix this. So he got out of retirement, went back. I believe that's the case. He may have been about to retire, but then went back to the school. At any rate, that's not important. But I went down there and I was doing some training with this guy because we were talking at one of these seminars, and he invited me and this other guy to come down and check out the facility. And we did some scenarios, like working with the simunition pistols and doing some hands-on stuff where he gave us a scenario, like, you're the officer, you're the bad guy, here's the scenario, go. And he was just kind of taking notes on, these are two guys that know how to fight and know how to shoot, but haven't been like just institutionalized to death and like beaten with the manual. So we're doing that. And in one of the rooms, there was some other 3-letter agency that was training. And I was watching them do defense against a gun grab drills. And they were fixating their pistol hand on the pistol and doing this like Buzz Lightyear to the rescue, like downward chop over and over again, while they ran backwards and yelled, get off my gun, get off my gun, get off my gun. Like that was Buzz Lightyear, Buzz Lightyear, Buzz Lightyear. Like that was their defense, right? And I was 17 and I'm looking at this and I'm like, I hope these guys never do a traffic stop. This doesn't make any sense. What the actual F is going on? They're like, oh yeah, this is how you stop someone from taking your pistol. And if you've seen Toy Story, watch closely. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So I would like to take a deep dive into, like, what are you actually teaching, right? When it comes to shooting, which I teach frequently now, and when it comes to fighting, because I've been doing that for 25 years now, okay? But then I want to look at how is training structured, because on a scale from most frequently, most likely to occur, to God, I hope that doesn't happen, right? You basically have arguing and fistfights and shootings. But a lot of the time, once, all the way over here on most likely to occur every day, you only get that training in the academy. And then they're like, figure it out on the job, right? There's no do it once a quarter. There's no like, just pretend to argue with each other and like try to stump the chump. Do that 5 minutes a week. Like the brain's a muscle, right? Like that's something that the more you do, the less caught off guard you are and the more at ease you are in dealing with that. In the middle, you got fighting, right? Which is something that, not to repeat myself, but like needs to be looked at. What are you teaching? Because jiu-jitsu is a fantastic sport. And if you do that as self-defense, meaning you go to the ground on purpose because you're comfortable there, all it takes is one extra bad guy to kick your lights out. Like, that's a terrible idea, going to the ground on purpose. And I like, you do that because you have the numbers, or, you know, because you have the numbers and it's like a kid or someone who's mentally challenged, right? And you don't want to actually hurt them because you, like, you know, there's a significant disadvantage there. So more frequently than just once at the academy, but less frequently than going to the range, you should be hitting each other, because that's important to like figure out how not to get hit and figure out how to get up off the ground if you get tackled, and figure out how not to go to the ground, not to get tackled, right? And then over here is like, yeah, also you need to be able to shoot. So it's not like those police shootouts we see in the news where there's 49 bullets fired and the bad guy was hit twice. It's like, yikes, you guys got to go to the range, eh? So it's like looking at the spectrum, it has to, one, not be bullshit as far as like the techniques are concerned, and B, Home Alone reference, 1B and D. And B, it has to make sense, like based on the frequency that it's probably going to happen. Like I train this the most because I'm going to do it the most. I train this the next most because I get in fights sometimes. And I also go to the range because I might have to shoot someone. God, I hope not. But right now it's typically like, yeah, we go to the range once a year. And yeah, everything else was OJT, Usually there's more of us, so I don't try to de-escalate anything. I just talk shit. It's like, oh, they gave you a badge. Oh.
There's so much there to unpack. I mean, I don't need to. You said things pretty clearly in a way that makes sense to me. It'll be interesting to talk to you again when you're elected sheriff and ask you some follow-up questions. Like one, for example, is you got to think, I think that most people who, maybe I'm wrong, I think most people who go up for jobs like this have good intentions. They want to do a good job for the right reasons. I want to believe that that's true. I do. And I use this example.
All my stuff is a cops are good guys sandwich, right?
Yep. I use this example sometimes. In San Diego, I had some friends on the police department, very close friend of mine in the police department, and he told me that, we were talking one day, BSing, and I'm like, man, there's like some fat cops. Like they're like and I mean, not to make fun of somebody for being fat, but like you're unfit. You're not fit. And you're supposed to go be real quick, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in case I don't want to forget this point. And he said, well, it's interesting because it boils down to a lot of cops don't exercise because our insurance policy does not cover if somebody gets hurt in the gym working out and they miss work, they'll get fired. They don't get workman's comp. They don't get any pay. They could lose their job. So a lot of people just don't work out, and there's no fitness standards upheld. And so the city can save money on insurance. And I'm like, I would have never thought that in a million years. It'll be interesting to see if you get in there and you're like, you realize some of these programs are flawed in some foundational way like that. And it just disincentivizes or in some other way fails to motivate people to do things that are otherwise common sense.
Yeah. No, that makes no. What you described does not make perfect sense, but your frustration makes perfect sense. But like one of the things that we're making fun of it the other night on here, I was in the comments section, right, talking about how the Marine Corps, height and weight standards are basically just like pulled out of a health textbook, and they've never actually seen any people.
Yeah.
So I think, a huge part of it, yes, cops need to be fit, but they don't necessarily have to look fit, right? Because like we've all met that round guy who's just like, he's round. He's got a big round body and big round arms and a big round head, right? And he could just pick you up with one hand and just like hold and just like fence post. Just like that guy's physically capable, right? As long as he's got like a mean 40-yard dash, I'm good with it. Like you are physically capable. Like 6 guys could hit you with hammers and not even make you mad. Like you have value. But I think a lot of it has to do with, it's like the physical capability part gets left off, and it just gets to where people are like what you said. It's like, man, look at these fat cops. I can't stand fat cops. How am I supposed to leave? My family feels safe because the cop's going to be fat when he shows up. And it's like, well, maybe he's just one of them big round dudes that can pick up a car, So I think physical capability is a lot more important than physical appearance. On a sliding scale.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%. I had an idea for a question here based on something you said. Maybe this is good. Like you're a Marine, you're a marksman, you're trained in hand-to-hand combat, you're running for sheriff. Here's a popular thing that I hear often. This will be a good question for you as like a candidate. Why can't cops just shoot somebody in the leg if they're attacking them with a weapon?
Hang on, let me just.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, Mr. Biden, the problem with that is that, first off, when someone's trying to punch you, what's the fastest moving part of their body?
Hand.
Hand, right? Next fastest.
Shoulder.
Elbows in there, in the middle, right?
Sure.
And then
sure.
like leastest fastest is the shoulder in technical terms. That's the leastest fastest, right?
Sure.
So you want your block to go somewhere in between arcing punch and command center so you don't get knocked out, right? And you want to impact them on something to stop their momentum. Leastest fastest is the shoulder and in, right? And that's just based on like what's the easiest thing for me to actually impact and cause damage to, and try to stop their center of gravity from continuing to progress towards me. Okay. The block, conversely, right, is as long and as huge as possible with the largest margin of error because the hand is moving so fast. Follow me in the like diagnosis of how a punch is coming at my face?
Sure.
Okay. So now anyone who's shot at a pistol range, right? There are some fundamentals that once you get down, it makes less of a difference. But imagine like the first few times you were at the range and you're shooting at like 5 yards and you're like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. And they go like Mel Gibson in the first Lethal Weapon. They just run that target all the way to the back of the range, like, and then it finally stops, right? And you're like, oh my God, this thing's smaller than the front sight. How am I supposed to hit that from here, right? Now, imagine that it's somewhere in the middle, but it's moving. It goes and it stops, and it goes and it stops, and it goes and it stops. It's like, okay, even if it's running at you, it's this. It's still not much wider than the front sight. Most of the time that people miss a shot with a pistol, it is from bad trigger manipulation or anticipating the gun and trying to prevent it from firing by being harder right before it goes the last minute, right? And both of those things send it opposite of your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, it sends it left. Both of those things do. So we want to maximize the margin of error in anything combat related, right? Like huge margin of error. As long as it's in this hallway, it'll die. That's good enough, right? That's what you're looking for when you're trying to hit something with a gun. And then you look at like the shooter, like what's most probable to happen when someone's manipulating that weapon. And when they're freaking out, man, it's probably going to go opposite to whatever their dominant hand is if they don't control their trigger manipulation really well. And if they're not anticipating the flinch, there's a double negative on purpose, I guess. If they're not anticipating the flinch, then it's going to be straight up and down, right? So what we're doing there is we're making the target this long cylindrical smallest margin of error, just left and right, smallest margin of error. And based on what people do when they're shooting, smallest margin of error. It's a terrible idea. It's just like, just shoot the ground instead. You're going to spend way less time missing. You just miss right away. Just do that, I guess. That's why. On top of the fact that you can shatter the bone, send a whole bunch of shards into the femoral artery and still kill them. Or you could hit them in the femoral artery far enough up that you can't get a tourniquet on it and they bleed out anyway, even though you wanted to be nice and do a warning shot and shoot them in the leg. And all of it stems from this, really this, I don't believe you as a cop mentality. So like all of that stuff is a symptom of the problem, which is, okay, you've been to training. We're going to assume it doesn't suck. You've been to the range and we're going to assume that you're competent. And now you're out here in the street and enough bad stuff has happened that you're like, oh crap, someone's life is in danger. Mine, theirs, whatever the case is. This is a bad day. Now I have to pull my gun. What a terrible just chain of events that this is. I have to shoot this person. You know what? Just let me give them more benefit of the doubt. Just in case either I'm the biggest idiot on the planet thus far, or maybe he'll just like change his mind and be less deadly in the time that it takes me to go, stop now, please stop. Oh shit, now I'm going to have to shoot you, right? So all of that is Monday morning quarterbacking. all of it's Monday morning quarterbacking, all of that stuff. And, quite frankly, it is only based on, people who've never been hit in the face, like what their opinion is of that scenario.
Yeah.
Mr. President, that is why you cannot shoot people in the leg.
Well, I just don't believe you.
Come on, Jack.
And
that's when, and I was asparagus. Where's my ice cream?
It takes a special person to put yourself in the arena like that, where you're going to be faced inevitably with questions like that from people who really don't care what you have to say, doesn't care how much of an expert you are, doesn't care how right you are. They're just there to attack your character, ad hominem types attacks. Yeah. And I applaud you for being willing to do it. I have another question. If you don't mind, real quick, I don't mind. Yeah. I have something pulled up over here, and it's the people on the screen are seeing it right now. It's the Onslow County Sheriff's Office website. And in case people are wondering what Onslow County is up against, hang on, just totally jumped. But there's a story here about two guys who were just arrested for selling cocaine.
I saw these guys. Yeah.
In Onslow County. Let's see, 2 counts of possession with intent to manufacture and sell cocaine, deliver cocaine. Is this is this a common thing out there in Onslow? Like, is this what you guys are dealing with?
Yeah. Whether it's coke or meth, or just petty larceny, just it's unfortunately somewhat frequent and usually not that crazy. It's like do people get shot? Yeah, but it's not a major city. It doesn't have major city problems. It has small city problems. So yeah, it's not uncommon. Like no one saw that on the Facebook feed or in the news and was like, what? Cocaine here?
Do you think, do you feel like you're prepared to take over the department and deal with people like that in the county?
Yeah, I think so. And mostly because of what I was talking about earlier, which is, there are guys who run drug enforcement, right? And, if I were a betting man, I'd bet you $5 whole that, Sheriff Miller was not in the command room, watching these guys through drone feed as they got arrested and saying do it now, get them now, right? Let the professionals work. I mean, someone who joined the force in the 80s has a lot of experience and should let the professionals work, right? It's I was talking about this with someone the other day, where it's imagine the full bird colonel coming down and watching the lance corporals clearing rooms and be like, all right, son, let me show you something. When you come in and you pivot, you get in that corner, you don't want to dig, sir, no offense, go sign stuff, man. This is my job, right? And I have that opinion about this as well, right? Where, what's the policies that are driving this, and what are the follow-on actions, and what are things that the sheriff's department is doing with scenarios like this? We're making sure we're taking it seriously. We're not just confiscating their stuff and telling them to get lost, right? Because that's hard drugs, and people die from hard drugs, right? So we're not just telling people to get out of here, kid, next time you're in trouble. But at the same time, there's this other aspect of it, which, this is what I was going to bring up earlier. I said, but there's this federal law that says in a drug raid, you can seize assets, and basically keep them for your own funds or auction them off or do whatever, in drug raids. So basically that was designed to break up cartels, right? If you pull over the car and it's got $3 million in duffel bags and a whole bunch of heroin in the back seat, the $3 million is also yours, right? So wow. Cool. Extra money for the budget. That's neat. And it double sucks for cartels because they lose their profits and their product. But I heard a guy at one of the GOP meetings, he was very proud of this. He said, this other guy that I'm running against got $80,000 last year towards the budget from stuff confiscated in drug raids. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm like, not for nothing, but in the drug world, over an entire county, over an entire year, $80,000 is a big raid or two. Or every time you're doing a drug raid because someone had intent to sell, not only are they doing the crime, doing the time, but you're also like what, confiscating their stuff and putting it on eBay so you have more money for training. That seems like something, that's one of those things that I have questions about, because if that's the case, that's good for the department and bad for the community, right? Like if you find a known terrorist and you drag him out in the street and cap him in the back of the head, it's a good day for America because we killed a terrorist. But we just made 12 more because everybody saw you drag Kareem out in the middle of the street and shoot him in the back of the head. And they're like, you know what? I don't know if the Americans are good guys, right? So if Jim Bob or whoever else is selling meth that he cooked and somehow didn't blow up in his trailer, right? And when you come in and you take away his freaking $900 a month income worth of meth stuff, sure, he should go to jail. He should pay the fines. He broke the law. Those are the rules. We live in a society, right? But then if his car was an accessory and he had, you know, his laptop on the table because he was using it for part of the trades and his cell phone and stuff, and we're selling that stuff. Now, when he gets out of jail, what do you think he's going to do? Use his not car and his not phone to get a legitimate job? Yeah, he's going to go right back to doing the same shit he was doing before because he doesn't have anything. Because that sounds like an opportunity to just let someone pay for it and go back to society that we're then trying to make a profit out of. And like that just opens the doors to a whole bunch of weird, corrupt stuff. And I really, really hope that that's not happening, at least not with bad intent in this county. But that does happen with bad intent in the country because of that federal law. And that's something that I have questions about, because that's a good for the department, bad for the people thing. We're making more people who are anti-cop, and we're increasing the recidivism rates because people get out and they're like, well, I had a car, but I guess I better go sell some real quick for old Jim Bob so I can have enough to buy another 1994 Civic so I can get back to, you know, doing things the way I used to. We're just like, you know, taking stuff away from people on top of the punishment. It seems extrajudicial in some cases. So I have questions about that. I really do, because there have been cases and there have been places in the United States where that takes a terrible turn for the corrupt. And even doing it legally, like if it's not an organized crime thing, that's pretty sketchy. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but like, I think that's pretty sketchy to be like, well, you had drugs, so it's mine now. I don't know.
Yeah. It's, it opens the door. I've always heard since I was a kid, my dad would tell me, theft is a crime of opportunity. And while I'm one who always blames the criminal for the crime and never the victim, it's true that if somebody is a thief and they happen to come across something really easy to steal, they'll probably take it. And you don't want to make that
if there's
any easier than it has to be.
If there's one thing that because I know we're coming close on time, that I want to make sure that I get out there is,
yeah, please.
There's this really big misconception that, you know, daddy government in the form of, you know, federalized healthcare or universal basic income or calling the cops. Daddy government is supposed to take care of me. That's crazy, man. Aren't you an adult? Take care of yourself. Like, there's a lot of people that were in a terrible spot on Virginia's I-95 last week with the big blizzard, right? Like, dude, you're from upstate New York, just like I am. Like, what did we have to have in our car all winter, or our parents would choke us out when we were kids? An emergency blanket, a flashlight, a flare, jumper cables. Sometimes my dad would be like, you don't have any snacks in here? It'd be a long night without anything to eat. Right. But like, you had all this stuff, like, hey, your gas tank better not be below half a tank. It's winter. It's like all of this, like, hey, guess what? If it sucks, you're going to have to live long enough to complain about it mentality. Now it's like, you know, I saw all these posts. They're like, I can't believe it took people 12 hours to get to us. You know how far I could walk in 12 hours? Far enough to find a house with electricity.
Yeah.
Like far enough to get to a store. You know, so this whole like, well, I'm really not my responsibility. Like that mentality blows my mind. Like that's crazy talk. So, you know, should you call the cops if something sketchy is going on? Yes. Should you own a gun? Yes. Should the gun be loaded if you are by yourself in your home and accessible? So if you're by yourself in your home as that crime of opportunity, you have a prayer in, let's just like a prayer in the wind of doing something for yourself. Yes, you should, right? So I have this video of me from going to a Craig Douglas course, which I can't recommend enough. Like, go to a Craig Douglas course when you get stateside. Of me getting in a verbal altercation and then getting jumped, and then another guy jumps in, and I have to fight both of these guys, right? And it lasts like 2 minutes. What's a good response time for a police call? Like 5 minutes?
Sure.
You could get in a verbal altercation, like an extended verbal altercation, then fight 2 guys more than twice before the cops show up. Best case scenario, right? So it's something I really want to push, really, whether I get elected or not, right? Because I'm starting to work a lot more at the range out here and working with the group that I've been training these Navy guys with, and getting more courses out there. But like, just be a little bit more resilient as a person, right? I want to do, and I'm serious about this, you may laugh, I want to do universal mail-in concealed carry permits. I want to send a packet to every address in the county. Be like, hey, Doug, if you meet this requirement, this requirement, and this requirement, you're eligible. You can conceal carry a pistol if you want to. Go to page 2. Here's the list of stuff you got to do. Floop, fill this out, fill that out, get that notarized, and close a check for this much for your background check, and close this much additionally on that check or on a separate check, or your fingerprint card so we can look you up. Flip the page. We'll contact you within this many days. Please have everything in this, envelope that's already pre-addressed and stamped. There you go. Like, why are nuclear arms such a big deal? Proliferation. Because that one guy that we really wish we could do something about has the bomb, right? Like, it's good to be that guy when you're just a regular person. Like, be the guy that's like, oh man, I really wish I could intrude on this guy's whatever. But we all have guns. Like, that's so important for being able to take care of yourself and be a hard target, right? And I want to do youth safety days where like we have the gun range and we got some like a smattering of 22 caliber guns out there. Come learn how to use a gun safely, right? Like, how many kids get accidentally shot with guns because they don't know what they're doing? They think they're playing Halo, right? Like, my daughter's 3 and I say, Ava, are you allowed to see my guns? And she goes, yeah. I said, who has to help you? She goes, you do. I said, can you do it by yourself? She'll go, no, I need your help. She's 3, right? I say, Ava, what's the first thing you got to do when I give you a gun? Make sure there's no bullets. Yeah, that's right. Like, right there at 3 years old, like, that's the fundamental knowledge necessary for nobody to get shot in a house. I mean, except for like an armed burglar, right? But like, no good guys to get shot in a house, which is the key objective here. So that's a big thing that I really want to push, because, the Second Amendment's important. Because self-defense is important, because you are important as a person. So, self-resilience and just being able to, not have to be like every monster movie in the planet or a slasher movie where you're like, 911, there's someone in my house. And then we watch the whole 45 minutes before the cops show up, like, while you hide. That sucks. That's why it's a scary movie and not a documentary, or it shouldn't be. So there, I got that off my chest. I feel taller now.
Good. It's well, it's another, complicated and controversial issue of guns. So basically, if I'm understanding your position is, you believe that citizens having guns makes them safer.
Yes.
The more guns, the safer people are.
Yes. And there's I don't want to get you in trouble because of there's a virus that's been going around.
You can talk about
there's this data, right, that shows there's this protective covering that you can wear that helps prevent the spread, something like 9% particle wise, and helps prevent the spread from coming in something like 11% if worn correctly and stuff like that, over a period of time for a big population. Guns do better than that at preventing crime and preventing the death and injury to the holder. They do a lot better than that. Should there be gun mandates?
Are you asking me?
I mean, it's a question to be out there.
Like,
there's
mandate.
There's all this talk about mask mandates, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
because they do help that much. They really do help a little. Guns help a little, right? But like anything else, education is the most important part. Education is the absolute most important part. Is, you know, exactly the same as training is wildly important for anyone who works with a gun all day, right? Anyone who's going to carry a gun and own a gun, they have to have that importance on it. So, you know, should there be mandates? No, of course not. That's silly, right? Because there are people who are like, well, I don't really want to be good enough to use it. Okay, that's fine. You shouldn't have one because you actually will be a danger, right? But anyone who wants one, anyone who wants to know how to use it better, like there shouldn't be hurdles to get to that.
I think that we could probably, you know, everything has a counterpoint. I agree about people should have access to, here's what I think, because, you know, it's interesting living in Okinawa. You lived in Okinawa.
Oh, yeah.
Living in Japan where there's no guns, in theory. Obviously, people have illegal guns in Japan, but where there's people just generally speaking, they don't have guns. You know, like I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm under any threat walking around Okinawa of being shot by a criminal. Effectively,
well, Okinawa's homogenous.
True, that's true. But in Japan in general, like when even in other parts, I feel like the threat's effectively zero. Now, conversely, in the United States, I've had friends who have been victims of gun violence. I've lost friends to victims of gun violence, and it's always it's the people who commit violence with guns are people who shouldn't have guns in the first place. And of course, the argument being that the more guns on the street, the more likely that those guns will end up in the wrong hands. And then, you know, we don't enforce gun laws that already exist. And then, and then fundamentally what I believe, having been through these life experiences, is that regular citizens, non-criminal people who just want to live their lives and not bother anybody else, should have a fair chance to defend themselves against reasonable threats that they could be faced with. And gun violence is, of course, one of those in the United States. And for that reason, I don't think that guns should be inaccessible to people. And they should not be broken down to the point where they're not usable. Like when you're talking about bullet buttons and, you know, limits on magazine size and you know, et cetera. Not that I'm the firearms expert on what are the modifications that people do to their guns. I don't know if I agree necessarily that everyone having a gun makes everyone safer. I think it's a complicated issue. You know, like if a bar is full of people carrying guns and it's the, you know, Game 7 of the World Series.
There's limiting factors, right? So like, I guess I'll lead into this with just a statement. That's my opinion. That is,
sure.
If cars got invented today, the permit process would be as bad as guns. They got grandfathered in. You know, it's like we saw that terrible thing in Waukesha a while ago, right? Where it's like cars, very, very dangerous in the wrong hands as well, right? But there's limiting factors. Everyone's got cars, and cars are everywhere, and you can't drive drunk. Like if you are purposefully a danger to people because of your altered state of mind and the tool you're using at the time, you're a bad guy. You get treated as such. So, you know, should it be the wild, wild west where we're all standing around at the saloon with 6 guns? I think there's too many people for that these days. You know what I mean? Like the murder rate was low because only 11 people lived in that town back then. It was high percentages, but it was low numbers. You know what I mean? Not to make too much light of a scenario like that.
Sure.
But in all seriousness, right? It's like, you know, should every home, in my opinion, like have the ability to not have some bad actor do whatever they want to them until the cops show up? Yeah. It doesn't have to be a gun. You could take, you know, BJJ or Krav or karate or anything else, right? But just not be, you know, basically a toddler with size 12 feet, like just going through the world. Like, I hope nothing bad happens, you know? So, you know, I think that's part of the responsibility of being in a free society, is not relying 100% on everybody else to do something for you, because then it gets into that whole chain of events of, well, if everybody is owed everything, then some people are forced to do some things. And now all of a sudden freedoms are going away. And, you know, that's not to go down like, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist and like, you know, the cabal, buy ammo, or it's like, whatever. I don't care about you people, but I probably made someone mad in the chat. That's okay. But it's like everyone has a responsibility in a free society to be able to maintain that freedom, because life is risky. Like living outside of your home, which I know we haven't had to do in a couple of years, right? Like it contains a certain amount of risk. So for you to just go into that with zero preparation and 100% expectation that nothing bad will happen because of the actions of good people, hopefully far away from here, that's sloppy. That's sloppy work. There's always bad guys. They might not be here right now, but they exist.
So, you have clear thoughts on things and opinions on things and positions, which I think is really important. I really appreciate that, that you lean into, and I do appreciate that too. But more importantly than where someone stands on one side of an argument or another, what I look at when I am talking to people is this a thoughtful person? Like, does this person appear to consider things before they make their arguments or take positions on things, which it seems like you certainly do. And I commend you on that. That's probably the most respectable thing someone can have when talking about positions on political or, controversial topics. And so I want to thank you for sharing those things and being thoughtful and taking things into consideration. We've been going for a little over an hour now, and I want to just take a second here to show the audience a couple things, which are, one is I have your Facebook page up right now, Jacob Donnenwirth for Onslow County Sheriff. So if anybody's interested, you can go to, is it donnieforsheriff.com, and it'll redirect you to this Facebook page?
Yes, and the website should be up very soon. I'm working with the developer, so sometime, I don't know, in the next week or so, the website should be live, so it won't be a redirect anymore.
Cool. So donnieforsheriff.com, and right now you have a Facebook page up. You have great photos here. And then I want everyone to know, too, that An Officer and a Man, a long list of short stories from a Marine officer, which is one of, I think, the most authentic military novels I've ever read, nonfiction, is available from Amazon, and I highly recommend everyone go check this out. If you want to understand the experience of 95% of the military, then I would go check out An Officer and a Man. It's incredibly authentic, it's incredibly funny, and it is a great look into your life and who you are, I would say. So thank you for writing this.
I think that the book, and someone asked me, because there are some stories in the book where there's no other way to take them other, this guy's a clown, right? Especially the mess night stories, right? But I think someone asked me, are you going to take that down while you're campaigning? And I'm like, no, transparency is my thing, man. Like I said earlier, I'm putting who I am as a person out there. This is who I am. This is how I think. This is how I make decisions. Put me in a tight spot. This is most likely how I'm going to jump. This is what it is. So I think it's good that the book's out there, and that, people that are going to try to find dirt on me have access to it. Because if I thought it was dirt, obviously the internet being what it is, I wouldn't try to run for public office if I thought that dirt was dirt, any substantial amount anyway. So there's one thing that I do want to address. I saw roll by in the chat.
Yeah.
And it was, somebody had commented like, dude, you shouldn't give a 3-year-old a gun. Yes. All of my guns are locked away from my 3-year-old, but I do carry every day, right? So when we're going to leave the house, I get it and I put it on. And sometimes she says, can I see that? And I say, yeah, you can. And the reason for that is the way that kids work, in my experience, is from having been a kid and wondering and seeing my friends, how they wondered about their dad's guns, and interacting with other kids when I was teaching at the martial arts school and everything like that. If you make something a secret from a kid, guaranteed they will find the key and check it out when you're not there. But if you're open with them, it's like, well, there's no alcoholism problems with teenagers in Europe, right? Because they're allowed to have some wine the entire time they're growing up. And by none, I mean way less than the United States by comparison. So when my daughter asks, can I see it? I go, yes, you can. Because I want her to know that as long as she asks, she can always see it. There's no reason to sneak around and look when I'm not there. And then I layer in, okay, but here's what we're going to do. We have to make sure that it's empty. This is where we check there's no bullets. This is where the magazine is out. Can you do that? No, you're too little, right? That's hard to do. So you need my help in order to make sure it's safe. Where can we point it? At the floor, at the wall, right? So I saw that comment go by earlier, but I was like mid rant. But I wanted to catalog it and come back to it. Is yes, my kids don't have access to my guns. However, they see me put it on every time we're about to leave the house and every time we come back in. So that's where we have that opportunity to have that conversation. And I would never argue like, well, no, you should leave them laying around because if they're smart, they'll figure it out. Like, okay, asshole. Like, no. But I just want to make sure that I clarified that so that way people weren't like, oh my God, he gets his 3-year-old a gun to go to bed at night. This guy's he's a little touched. Like, not the case. So, I mean, I'm a little touched, but not in that regard.
Sure. Well, thank you for clearing it up. And I'm glad you said that too, because you remind me of another question that was in the chat too, which I thought was a good one. Somebody wanted to know, what is your everyday carry?
I'm glad you asked. It depends on my mood. And the event, you know what I mean? Because like you can't wear a Glock to a fancy event. Glocks don't dress up. You know what I mean? Like you need a good looking 1911 for a fancy event. But most of the time I carry a Glock 19X. I got a Holosun 507 red dot on it because I went to a Jedi, the Scott Jedlinski class. And if you're stateside and you have the opportunity, train with Jedi. It is 100% worth the money. Like this dude, not only is he like the fastest pistolier that I've ever seen, including old Westerns, he's a very, very good teacher in the body mechanics of a smooth draw stroke and a fast draw stroke and accurate shooting. So, but yeah, Glock 19X with a red dot appendix carry. That's my go-to.
Nice. Okay. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
There's one more question here. And I just want to say too, I think somebody in your district has been watching this episode too. I got a message.
Ooh.
And I'm going to ask this question because normally I don't get into stuff like this, but because of that, maybe we should ask it. Somebody said, now I'm just gonna read the question and let me know if you have let me know if you have any questions about what this means. The question was, do you support the big lie?
Oh, I think that's a 2020 election question.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Here's what I think. Votes count. I don't think we've reached a point in this country where votes have not counted. So I think that the people who are currently in political positions had the votes required to do that. Now, was everyone who voted one way or the other well informed? There, I will say no, because for 4 years, if you turn on this channel, it's this guy is literally Hitler for 4 years straight, right? And I go over here to this other channel and it's like, these guys are actual communists. They're building a gulag with FEMA money, right? And it's like, okay, somewhere here in the middle is the truth, right? But people who only turn on this channel or only turn on that channel get fed one stream of information, and it's exactly the same every single day. So the advantage that from what I saw the Democratic Party had was most of the household names in news. Every news story every day was what a terrible person Trump was. And if you say it enough, eventually the average person thinks, well, I can't all be wrong. Like this is literally like the 5th story this week that this guy's like racist, fascist, like wants to kill us all because we're brown, like whatever the case is, like, you know, depending on which day of the week it is. If you do that long enough, it's going to have an impact. And I think that is what swayed the election last year compared to the 2016 election. And, you know, it's like the other part of it is, I think it had enough national attention that if there was enough inconsistencies for it to actually be like stolen, someone would have found something. You know, it's like Steven Crowder can find a bunch of bum addresses, and by a bunch, I mean like a few dozen with a small amount of digging. And someone over here can say like, I want to recount. And they're like, yeah, well, it was close both times. And everyone's like, oh, see, I told you, right? But the big thing that it comes down to is like, how many people can keep a secret? One person can keep a secret. 2 people might be able to keep a secret. 3 people, it's getting a little fishy, right? Like a platoon, not a chance in hell. Not a chance in hell. 40 guys can keep a secret. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not, right? Hundreds of highly paid, like integrated bureaucrats all over the country, all doing stuff. And everyone has their little like Illuminati circle. it's too many people to keep a secret, man. It's too many. That alone makes it implausible. So I think there was a lot of emotional manipulation that led up to 2020 for 4 years, that led to people deciding emotionally instead of based on fact patterns. That's my opinion. Everyone's got one. Most of them stink, right? Kind of like armpits. But that's where I land on it.
Yeah, it's reasonable. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
One more question. What year did you attend TBS? The
12.
basic school. 2012.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. Good times. Not really. It was Frozen Fox. It was winter, all winter.
Oh,
actually, here's a short fun story. Is I graduated TBS in March of 13, and in August of 13, when I got to Okinawa, I almost had all the feeling back in all my toes.
That sounds like a good time. Oh,
yeah,
man,
I put on flip-flops, and I was like, oh, I can feel this. I can feel that thing between my toes.
I would hate that. Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say? The floor is yours before we get ready to sign out.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on. Thanks to everyone that tuned in. I talked a lot tonight. I feel like you'd ask me a question and I would just like run down the rabbit hole with Alice held captive.
That's what we're here. We're here to listen. We're here to listen.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Check out my website. Obviously I'm being wildly transparent. That's my whole thing. So if you guys don't like me, that's fine. I hope you're not in this district because I want everyone to vote for me. So if you don't like me, I hope you vote somewhere else. But no, it's really, so Tom, I was talking to Tommy about this, right? And he was like, dude, I can't believe you're getting into politics because you've never been one to care like what people think of you. And I was like, dude, I still don't. Like, I'm just gonna keep doing what I want. And then if people like it, they'll vote for me. So that's just kind of that's what I'm running on. Is this is what I think is right? This is how I would do things. This is my experience. Vote for me if you want. So thanks to everyone for tuning in and listening. I know this is not usually the type of podcast that you host, but I also appreciate your flexibility and being like, yeah, we can talk about this instead, I guess. And buy my book because it's funny.
I can confirm. I do endorse that 100%. I endorse this book 100%.
And Sam did in the chat earlier.
Yep.
So
much appreciated. It is hilarious. All right, man. I appreciate it. It was fun to have you on. I love having these conversations. I love sitting here and talking to people as much any day, as much as I love reading the craziest news stories from around the military. So
we're good at finding.
Thank you very much. They make it easy. The troops make it easy.
That's true.
So with all that being said, thank you everyone for joining me. If you want to know more, again, it's DonnieForSheriff.com. Currently, it'll send you to a Facebook page, but the website will be up soon. He's the author of An Officer and a Man, and he's running for sheriff in Onslow County in North Carolina. So thank you guys for checking all that out. That's going to be it for this episode, which will be available on podcast and here on YouTube to listen to whenever you'd like. And real quick, and one more thing. The primary election is in May, right? So we'll have
May 17th.
The next step, the next big move is going to be May 17th. So if you guys are interested and you do live there and you want to vote, go out on May 17th and vote for the candidate that you believe is most qualified to represent your interests. And we will check back in with you either before or around then to see how that goes.
Yeah, man. I'll be in the chat no matter what.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. For now, that's the Scuttlebutt.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.